Paperback Classics Audio presents Dark Shadows, Book 27, Barnabas, Quentin, and Dr. Jekyll's Son, by Marilyn Ross. Read for you by Kathryn Leigh Scott. Chapter 1. A cold wave descended on all New England during the first week of January in 1908. No sooner had the holiday festivities ended than a raging blizzard crossed the region, followed by temperatures dipping as low as 20 below zero. And though the cold brought fine weather, the winter sun did little to ease the chill. All activity slowed to a near halt, and people huddled in their houses stoking the fires and venturing out into the bitter weather only when necessity demanded it. And in the stately mansion of Collinwood, on the outskirts of the tiny Maine fishing village of Collinsport, the Collins family shut off many of the 40 rooms in the great house in an effort to combat the unusual cold. At 21, golden-haired Emily Collins had never experienced such a winter before, but her middle-aged graying father, Charles Collins, intrigued her with stories of a great blizzard and cold spell of the 80s. Standing before the blazing log fire in their elegant living room, he now told her about that earlier winter with a grim smile on his stern face. He was a thin, austere man, with a nasal twang to his voice. "I was in Boston when the storm began," he said, his hands folded behind his back. "The side-wheeler that was due to leave was so blurred by the snow, I could scarcely see it from the wharf. And the dockman told me the sailing had been postponed until after the storm. I had dismissed my carriage, so there was nothing for it but to struggle back through the snowstorm on foot until I found my hotel." Rebecca, Emily's mother, a buxom woman with a round face and a pleasant smile, looked up from her high-backed chair and nodded. "What was the year before we were married? I was in Portland, and I remember being worried about you." "Well, you might have been," Charles Collins said with a chuckle. "I very nearly didn't make it to my hotel. I was near collapse when I reached the shelter of its lobby, and I didn't venture from the place until 36 hours later when the storm ended." "And then, were you able to take the coastal boat back here?" Ada, his foster daughter, asked. A dark-haired girl with dainty features. She was the daughter of a former manager of the family fish-packing plant, and less than a year older than Emily. At the death of her father, she had been adopted by Charles and Rebecca Collins and brought up as a sister to Emily. Charles Collins gave her one of his rare smiles. "The boat didn't start out along the coast for another 2 days. It took that long to get the city partly cleared of the snow and the passengers and freight gathered. And by the time we left, the cold spell had set in. And I reached Collinsport, it was at least as cold as it is here tonight." Rebecca Collins shivered and gestured toward the fireplace, saying, "I think you should add another log, Charles. We mustn't let the fire die down." "Very well." He obediently selected a good-sized birch log from the stack beside the fireplace and thrust it into the blaze. Emily knew that her father's stern ways masked a kindly heart. He was anxious to keep the family together and fearful that his only son, Frank, should turn out to be a drunken weakling like Stephen Collins. A constant source of trouble and worry to Charles Collins was his younger brother, Stephen. In his early 30s, Stephen was a confirmed drunkard who did little to help with the fish-packing business and who had bothered Charles in another way by showing a romantic interest in Ada. Unhappily, Ada seemed to be falling in love with the curly-haired, rather good-looking Stephen. "Where is Frank?" Charles asked, brushing a bit of birch bark from his sleeve. Rebecca looked uneasy. "I said he was going skating.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?